Okay.
You're on.
I'm already there still. Isn't it supposed to go 3, 2, 1?
I think it did.
Oh, okay.
So, hey, everybody. It's the Heather and Paul Show on Facebook Live. This is our second episode. We were planning on doing one on Monday, and we moved it to today.
I'm pretty sure your caffeine just kicked in.
No. You have to bring some energy. Nobody wants to listen to people who are not at least have a little more energy than themselves.
All right, we've got people joining in. Thanks for joining us. And hey, just give us a shout out. Let us know where you're joining in from so we know who's here. I see Steve. I see Lizzie. Hey, Lizzie. Lori McNaughton. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, guys.
Knight. Great to see you. Oh, Glenn Frith. Oh, my gosh, Glenn.
Hey, Glenn.
Glenn is our local hero who just went through quite an ordeal with Hurricane Irma. And Glenn, so great to see you.
Oh my God, I hope you're feeling better. And thank you for sharing your story too, because it really made a really big impact, I think, on a lot of people about watching and taking care of their health and going to get the regular checkups and taking care of yourself just in general. So thanks for that.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. Hope you're doing well. Our episode today is all about your results. And from our experience in business, both personally and with all the clients who we work with, we know that most companies, most professionals do not have a good enough system set up to produce the kind of results that they want. So I want you to check in and ask yourself the question, do you have the results that you want? Do you have the results you want in business? Do you have the results that you want personally for yourself? And if you're not happy with those results, the message here is that is simply, your results are simply a reflection of the habits that you have. So it's not really about focusing on changing the results. It's really turning and looking at what are the habits that I have? What are the daily habits? And we are in the first week of the quarter, and we feel like this is the perfect time to get clarity on the number one change that you're looking to make for the quarter. So the first thing we want to ask you, and I want you to answer, is do you right now have clarity on the number one most important result that you're after this quarter? So by December 31st, 2017, do you have that result crystal clear for yourself? The one and only number one change. I'm not talking about the day-to-day, what's going to happen anyway. I'm talking about that result you're looking to change. Do you have enough clarity? I'm going to suggest to you that most of you, unless you have a really good system in place and really good habits that you've created, you don't have enough clarity.
So let's talk about that just in our own world.
Okay.
So this over the summer, we've had a really busy summer. And a lot of it has been travel, and of course we had the hurricane, and things have just kind of compounded on each other. And it's been really great, but it also has thrown us off track a little bit.
More than a little bit.
And I think as we sat down and we were like, man, it's already October. Like, the year's coming. They already have Christmas stuff up at Costco. That's when you know, right?
I know it's over, yeah.
Oh my God. So we're just looking at what is the plan? What do we, and also we're looking at our own P&L statement in our business, and we're saying, what do we need to do to reach the goal that we set out in the beginning of the year? And we're a little behind. So what plan do we need to put together for achieving this goal in the next 3 months? And what we really came up with is we needed to get clarity on exactly what we wanted and then how we were going to process that step by step.
So, whether you're an entrepreneur or an executive, whatever that result is for you, it may be a revenue and a profit result that you're after. If so, you can get really clear on that because that's numerical, so you know exactly how to measure it. But if it's not that, let's say that you're an executive and you're working in an organization, you want to make sure that whatever that result is, that's your number one priority is really lined up with the overall organizational goals. And every organization that I've been in, that I've been either working with where they're my client or I've worked for, have very different processes and procedures for how they set those goals, how they communicate those goals, or if they set them at all. So if you don't have clarity on what your organization is looking for from you, don't feel like you're alone there, because many, many people who we work with do not really understand what the expectations are for them in their role. So if that's true for you, then I would suggest that you go and you talk to somebody, talk to your boss, and find out exactly what their number one priority is for you, and does it line up with what you think it is? Because a lot of times You might catch your boss off guard because he or she may not have a direct response for you.
Well, and remember, I mean, the last episode we had last week was about procrastination and making that decision, right? So this kind of just dovetails into that, is making that decision that you are going to get clarity on exactly what you want. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges, because if you don't have clarity, my belief is if you don't have clarity, it makes the waters very mucky. It's hard to figure out what are the first steps, so it's the second step and third step in this whole process. And clarity is really the key to understanding. And that all starts with understanding what is the goal that you are trying to achieve.
That's right. So I think this is a good point for us to give our super, super simple 5-step process. And as we're going through it, give us some feedback and let us know if you relate to this, if it resonates with you, hit your like button. If it's not something that's happening in your world right now, you might want to hit the wow button. But we'd love to hear some feedback as we go through this 5-step process. Do you have it nailed already, or do you know you need some work? All right, so the simple 5-step process, and this is really our process to accelerate change. That's what we stand for at Evolve Global. That's what we do. We help people make changes, the right kinds of changes that produce better results in their world.
And then accelerate that change.
Yeah, I mean, you only want to accelerate changes that are good changes.
Right, yeah, because not all change is good change, right?
Right. Okay, simple 5-step process. First step, we've already said it. We've said it again and again. And if, those who work with us, you know that you'll hear it from us over and over. Step number 1, clarity on the results. And again, when we talk about clarity, we're talking about getting crystal clear. So think about it, you get in your car and you go to plug an address into your GPS because you're headed somewhere. You don't just sort of tell the GPS where to go, you actually give it an address. And so we're talking about that level of clarity. Do you know what your exact destination that you're after by December 31st, 2017? Now, when you think about getting that level of clarity that you need, what is the change that you need to make? The number one most important change you need to make, you make it with clarity. We recommend that you get this clarity on a quarterly basis. So I want you to think in your minds, quarterly clarity. I want to hear from you right now. Do you have the level of clarity needed right now for fourth quarter? If so, hit your like button. If not, hit any other button. Hit the wow button, hit the sad button, hit the mad button. So give us some feedback. Do you have your quarterly goal absolutely lined up for you, crystal clear? You know exactly what you're doing and where you're going. If yes, hit the like button.
And thanks, Chris Knight. Thanks for joining us. And he says, know your end outcome.
Yes.
That's absolutely true.
Absolutely right. You've got to have the outcome in mind. Okay, we got somebody with a sad face, so you're not where you need to be right now on your goal setting. That's okay. That's all right.
Yeah, that's all right, because it's just step 1 in the 5-step process.
And it's perfect wherever you are. Look, part of the reason we're doing this is because we are in the first week of the fourth quarter. It's not too late for you. That's the great news, okay?
And, it's setting the intention. So if this is something you haven't been thinking about at all, well, at least we're not catching it to the end of the year where we're talking about this. And I think most people are thinking about the goals that they need to set like January 1, right?
Yeah.
That's when most of us do it. So how about we get ahead of the game right now and we start working on it today?
Yeah.
And stop the procrastination, move forward, make that decision, take the first step, get clarity. And sometimes I find for myself, and this has a lot to do with behavioral styles as well, Heather, is that if I usually like to work collaboratively with people. And so I like doing this because Heather and I get to work together. And Heather would probably prefer to do it on her own. But as far as planning and getting clarity, sometimes I need to sit down with somebody else and talk it through to make sure that I'm asking, maybe sometimes it's the questions that need to be asked to me to be able to figure out exactly what I want. And so finding, for other people, it's not necessary. Sometimes they know exactly what they want.
Yeah, and you're getting some support on that too, that there are other people out there who really like the collaborative effort. And you're right, with my behavioral style, okay, so if I'm go, Paul's slow, right? My behavioral style,
slow.
You're like, come on, with your behavioral style, with your DISC style, SCDI, right, or ID. And so there's a difference in energy level.
We'll do another episode on DISC so that you know what we're talking about.
Yeah, if you're not aware of DISC, let's just say that we all bring different levels of energy into everything we do. And planning any kind of change that we're making, we all do it differently, right? You can't just assume that the way you think is the way someone else thinks. And so Paul prefers a slower, more methodical, more systemized, more thought out and strategic type of plan. Whereas
if that's you, I know what you're going through.
Yes, he does. And I prefer to just go fast. You know, I just want to go, like, I just want to think about it for just a nanosecond and then go and start getting results because I'm so results oriented. So you have to know yourself. You have to know what your tendencies are. One of my biggest challenges is forcing myself to sit down, to collaborate, to talk about the strategy of where we're going. So if you know that you struggle with this, then your systems and practices and habits that you create for yourself become that much more important. For me, if I don't have the system in place that forces me to slow down, I just keep going and I keep driving. So you should know if you have that same challenge.
Well, and that can also be a benefit and a challenge for couples that work together, or whatever, in your business, or your spouse, or whoever. If you're working together, having different behavioral styles. It's not male, female. It's just because, I mean, really, you have what would be considered the male type of behavioral style.
Mm-hmm. Right, because some people think
but it's not that. It's just how we're wired.
It's behavioral style. Some people think about males as being the assertive and the dominant, and quite frankly, you either are or you aren't, based on your style, not based on your sex. So let's like get past that, right? So yeah, learning to work together with your styles, working with other styles is an important aspect of this conversation. But going back to our simple 5-step process to accelerate change, number one is getting clarity on the number one result. So if you're not there right now, I want you to just make a note for yourself that this is something that you're going to commit to doing. And don't just stop there. Actually go to your calendar right now and find a chunk of time. Give yourself at least a half day, if you haven't done this already, to really sit down and think about and strategize. Now, if you're someone like me where you think half day, you got to be kidding me. I'd never spend that long, thinking through what I want to do for the quarter. Trust me on this. If you schedule a half day and you get it done sooner, then you can go do something else. But set aside time. We did it last weekend for this quarter because, as Paul said, we've had some distractions in the last month.
And we did it really, we do it all the time, but we needed just to get centered because coming out of the summer, it was a bit of a distraction.
Yeah, definitely. All right, let's talk about step two. Step two is clarity on the number one driver that produces those results. Now, when we talk about the number one driver that produces the results, we want to talk a little bit more about what that driver could be for you. So I'll give an example of just working with a client recently on their quarterly strategy, and they were talking about revenues that were going to be generated from their sales team. So this was more of a departmental type of goal. And when I asked them, what is the biggest threat to you achieving that result? The overwhelming response was the activity. If the sales team didn't do the right activity, they weren't going to get the result they were after. Now, the question is, do you know what that right activity is for you? Our client knows exactly what it is, and it has to do with number of appointments that are set. But do you know what is the activity, the number one activity that produces the results? So again, if you're just focusing on results, you can't move results. You can only move the activity that creates the results. Are you crystal clear on what the number one activity or the top 2 or 3 activities are that produce the results you're after? Now, sometimes this is where people really struggle, is they're not sure. They're focused so much on the result and moving the results that they're not thinking enough about the strategy, about the activities that they're really focused on. So you got to know what your activities are. If you're lacking any clarity or you're not sure what activities are the main drivers for your results, this is a place to really sit down, talk to your team, figure out the strategy there, right?
Right. So we know in our business, right? Like, what is the driving activity that helps us reach our goals?
So the driving activity is going to be ultimately me having a conversation with a qualified decision maker in an organization, right? And we have that qualified defined within our company, right? So we're typically working with mid-sized privately held. So it is me actually connecting and having those conversations. But what gets me that conversation? There are a lot of strategies that get me the conversation. So it's public speaking. When I'm hired at a trade association or a conference and I get up and I speak in front of a number of different executives, that's one way that these people reach out to us, right? Another way is our referral relationships, right? We have a lot of clients who we're working with proactively to get referrals to other clients just like them. So
right, we do email campaigns, we do networking, but I think the important thing to understand about that driving activity, the main one is that, you know, you have all of these other activities. So let's say I go to a networking event and I go out there, but I don't ever talk to anybody, but I'm counting as an activity networking, right? So I can check that off, and this is not how you do it, is you would check it off and say, okay, I went to a networking event, but it didn't really drive you towards the results. Now, if I went to the networking event, met somebody, got their card, followed up with them, then got an appointment for Heather to have a conversation with them, now that counts as. So there's a lot of confusion around what activities cause, what is that driving, the main driving activity, which gets you the results.
Right, right. So if you're just joining us, we are on step 2 of a simple 5-step process that will help you accelerate change in your organization for massive results. And step 1 was getting clarity on the result. Step 2 is getting clarity on the number 1 driver for that result. And that's what we're talking about here. I'm going to bring us to step 3. I think every one of these steps could be its own conversation to really go into more depth about how do you define it. But let's go straight to step 3. And step 3 is all about how are you measuring your activity, your most important drivers. It's creating a sort of a scorecard or a scoreboard for your organization. And we all know that keeping score has you play the game differently, right? You were just telling me about tennis. What's your?
Yeah, so I was out there. I was outside yesterday playing tennis, and I was watching another group because my group hadn't showed up yet, and so I was watching the other group, and they were just warming up. You could just tell. I couldn't really hear what they were saying, but I could see in the way that they were playing the game is that they were just warming up. There was no competitive energy to it. And then I looked away and did my thing, and then I looked back and they had started the game. And without knowing that they actually started the game, I could see that they were keeping score. And that's a big difference between the warm up and nobody really cares about if you hit a good shot or a bad shot, or if it stays in or it goes out. But as soon as they start playing, everybody really cares about that.
Right. So you can absolutely see the difference in the level of intensity when the score is being kept. Can you imagine as a spectator going to watch any kind of sporting event and let's say the scoreboard's down? How much fun is that to watch a game where there's no score being kept? Too many organizations do not have a methodology for keeping score. And when you think about it, I'm not talking about, we've got one of our clients, it's a professional services firm. They send me a spreadsheet with their scoreboard. And there are so many different numbers on this spreadsheet that it just makes your head spin. And that, which is fine. That's actually great for them to have that information at a leadership level, at a senior leader level. But that's not the same scoreboard that you're going to share with the people who are out there doing the work. They need something. Think about on a football scoreboard, and you're gonna know this way better than I am. But on a football scoreboard, you only have a handful of numbers, 6 different numbers, right? You don't have all the
there's
stats
the score, the timeouts, the time that's left, and first down, and or what down it is, and whatever. But for a professional football team, the coach and all of the assistants have so many different metrics that they're measuring. Every situation is broken down. They are so complex in the amount of information that they keep, but you could not give that to the players to keep track of because they would just be overwhelmed and frozen with the amount of numbers that they had to remember, right?
That's correct.
And so the only thing that's important to them is the situation and what are the key numbers that actually make a difference, right?
Right. So you want to keep it really focused. Do you know the numbers that you want your team focused on? This is really the question, which has everything to do with the expectations that have been set. And again, if that's not clear enough, then we're not really focused on driving the activity, because people will pay attention to where, intention goes where attention goes. So just make sure that you've figured out the numbers that you are tracking. and that you've got them displayed in some kind of way that allows for the team to see those numbers. All right, so that is number 3.
Now we're on 4.
Now we're on number 4. Okay, so number 4 is a system for accountability. And there are many people who don't like the word accountability.
Does anybody like that, really?
Well, yeah, you do if you want
results.
If you want results, you love accountability. And more than anything, you love having a system for accountability, because most people don't actually have it systemized. And so it becomes really stressful, because 3 out of 4 behavioral styles really don't like conflict. And people associate accountability with conflict. Well, you shouldn't have to. It doesn't need to be that way. If you are scared of accountability, it means you don't have the right system in place. Because once you line up that system, and you have a system that works, that flows, that everybody's used to, they've been trained on this system, it's just conversational. It's just having great meetings, and it's having a series of meetings with a certain rhythm where everybody knows what they're expected to report and everyone takes accountability for themselves, but they present it publicly. So it is an amazing, amazing scenario when you have the right kind of system for accountability within any office, because nobody stresses out about it. But here's more like what reality looks like, okay? I was talking with one of my clients just a couple of days ago, and she was describing their meeting culture. And after hearing about this meeting culture, what we really came up with was the fact that their meeting culture is currently what we would call dysfunctional, okay? So it's just not working. So let me describe it to you. The meetings are not starting on time. They are not following an agenda. They have tried putting an agenda together, but no one sticks to it. So there's no one really facilitating that meeting, and they never end on time. And people may or may not show up. And sometimes they wait for people to show up. Sometimes they don't. So when you talk about a loose meeting culture, it's about as loose as it gets, which is incredibly frustrating for all of those who want to have results out of the meeting. So if you've ever experienced a meeting like this, yeah. Show us some feedback. If you've ever had one of these meetings, it's really tough to suffer through a meeting like that. So while you think about it, the meeting structure, the way that it is right now, is actually just a result. Right? It's a symptom. If your meetings are terrible, if they're disorganized, that's just a symptom of your meeting culture not being established intentionally. So every company has a culture, and has a culture as it relates to meetings. And if your meeting culture sounds anything like what I just described and it's not good, all that means is you haven't actually intentionally set your meeting culture, which literally is like facilitating a conversation about how do we want to meet together. Now, what's really interesting is I've had executives push back before on collaborating about this meeting culture, because the way that it is currently, no one shows up on time, we don't start on time, we don't stop on time, we don't follow an agenda. And he said, well, listen, if you are going to have a conversation about establishing proactively and intentionally a meeting culture that everybody wants, trust me, no one's going to show up and offer, well, you know what? I don't think our meetings should ever start on time. I think we should just wait for everybody. They're not going to say, I think we should always go over in our meetings. They're not going to say, I don't think we should follow an agenda. I think we should just go all over the place and then squirrel. Like, no one's going to say that. We all want to have meetings that respect our time. We all want to have meetings where they start on time, they end on time, and we have a specific purpose, and we know how to prepare for the meeting so we can get in and make the decisions and then get out. That's what we all really want. If you're with me on this, give me a like button. Like, this is what we want to have in a meeting. Some of you are like, no, I don't even want to have meetings. But look, if the meeting is structured well and you have a great culture, of course you want to have the meeting. So anyway, that is step 4, is creating that system for accountability, creating a meeting where you're actually looking at the scoreboard, you're checking up on who's doing what. Did you do what you said you were going to do last week? Did it work? Did it produce the results you're after? If not, what are you recommitting to? It's really simple. So let's get to step 5.
Step 5.
Come on, give us your time. Step 5 is alignment with the leadership team. And this is a really super, super important step. Is that if you don't have your senior leaders, your managers bought into this entire system, this entire program, starting with your results, really getting committed and bought into the results that you're after. If you don't have your leadership engaged and bought in on that, you don't have anything going on, right? So you've got to have alignment with the leadership, not only on the result, You have to have agreement and alignment on the drivers that produce the result. You have to have agreement and alignment on how you're keeping score and how you're displaying it. And absolutely have to have agreement on your meetings for accountability. What is the system that you're creating? Because I can't tell you how many times it's happened where I've heard about companies that start this off and they do really well. Like they have great success because they're having these meetings, and then all of a sudden they stop doing it. Yeah. I just heard an example, a phenomenal example. One of our clients had a location, they had multiple locations around the country. One of the locations implemented the power hour. If you're in sales, maybe you've had this power hour before, maybe your company does it, but essentially it's an hour where all salespeople get together and they're basically dialing for appointments. They're hitting the phones and they're doing it together, and they're kind of creating an energy and a contest about how many appointments can you get. So this organization, this one branch, did the power hour every single morning from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. with the entire sales team. And of course, the results were phenomenal. They had the best month they had ever had in the history of their company. So they kept doing it, and they did it for the second month. Guess what happened? They had the best month they had ever had in the history of the company. Now the salespeople are just absolutely so tired of power hour. They don't want to do power hour anymore, and it's getting in the way of them taking their kids to school, and it's getting in the way of this and that. And like, oh, I really love the results of power hour. I just don't want to do it your way. I want to do it from home. So they badgered and badgered and badgered their managers until they finally said, okay, fine, we're still doing the power hour, but you get to do it from ever you want to do it. What do you think happened? Their results went like this. So nobody did the power hour. So the whole idea of getting leadership aligned is that whatever you decide to start and create as a habit is that you have consistency and you have persistence, and you don't let the obstacles get in the way of whatever system you've committed to. If you decide that you're going to have a daily huddle, can I tell you how many times this has happened? I've heard stories about this. We're doing the daily huddles and they're awesome. And then one day somebody can't make it, and so they don't do the huddle, and then it just falls off. So the leadership buy-in and alignment is the most critical aspect to tie the whole thing together. So again, recapping those top 5 strategies. Paul, do you want to do the recap?
Well, I mean, so the first, well, Heather, why don't you do it?
Why don't I?
I got so engaged in listening to you speak the entire time. I was like, all right, so why don't you just finish it off?
All right. Recap of the 5 strategies. Number 1, you've got to have your result crystal clear for yourself. Number 2, you've got to know that the top drivers that produce the results. Okay, you got to know what you're measuring and make sure that the team is really engaged with the top few things that you're putting on that scorecard or that whiteboard, that scoreboard. Number 4, you have to have a system for accountability. What's your system for meetings? What's the rhythm, and what are you committed to? How long are they? What's the agenda for those meetings? And then last and most important, to hold the whole thing together, you got to make sure that your leadership team is completely bought in, engaged, and aligned behind your system and structure. So that is just an example. It's an example of what we use on our team. It's an example of how we help other companies, put this together. If you checked off all 5 of those and you say, you know what, we are killing it in all 5 of those areas, then I also know that you're killing it in your results. Congratulations that you have such a great process set up for yourself. If you are not killing it in any one of the 5, which we know is very likely, because let's face it, you've got so much going on, everything's so busy, you may not have the system that you want to have and the habits around using that system, because a lot of you, look, you know what to do, you're just not always doing it. But if you need help with it, you can reach out to us. Go send us a message here, or go see us at heatherchristie.com. And what a closing parting thoughts.
Hey, I think you did a great job today. Yeah, good job.
Thanks.
And this is my little accountability coach.
Oh, and mine too. So, we made this commitment to Facebook Live as one of the strategies that we're implementing during one of our planning sessions. And so all I can say is we're committed. So we'll see you again next week.
Yeah, I hope this was valuable for you. And if it was, just leave us a comment or hit us a couple likes. And we look forward to seeing you next week.
Share it if you like it. And yeah, see you next week.
Have a great week.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.